with stories in Genesis. Today our scripture is from Genesis chapter 28, verses 10 through 17. And this is the dream or vision that Jacob has at Bethel. And the way that the narrative tells the story, Jacob is a schemer, kind of a striver, always trying to get ahead. His name, Yaakov, even means heel grabber, because the story is that he and Esau were twins in the womb. Esau was about to be born first, and Jacob didn't want that to happen. So Jacob grabs Esau by the heel to try to stop Esau from being born first. So his name becomes Yaakov, the heel grabber. And then one day Esau is out hunting. He's famished. He's utterly hungry. Jacob has cooked up a delicious bowl of lentil soup. Esau asks Jacob if he can have some of that. And Jacob says, "Sure, but just sell me your birthright in exchange." And then later, Jacob and his mother, Rebekah, scheme together. Isaac, who is now old and has very difficulty seeing and hearing, is going to bestow a blessing on Esau, his oldest son. And Esau goes out to hunt his father's favorite game. And meanwhile, Rebekah and Jacob team up. She dresses him up in animal skin so that he'll appear, his arms will be just as hairy as Esau's hairs. And Jacob is to go in there and pretend to be Esau and to take that blessing. And that's what Jacob does. Isaac seems unsure, but he's convinced that this is his son Esau, and so he gives him the blessing. Jacob leaves. Then later Esau comes in for real, and his father tells him the bad news that he's already given the blessing. And once given, it cannot be retracted, nor can it be given to someone else. And Esau is enraged and vows to kill Jacob. Now, when chapter 28 begins, it's many years later, but Jacob is still very much afraid of Esau. And sure enough, Esau comes along with 400 soldiers. So it seems like Esau probably is going to get his revenge on Jacob. And so this happens as Jacob is on the run. This is Genesis 28, starting at verse 10. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. He reached a certain place and spent the night there. When the sun had set, he took one of the stones of that place and put it near his head. Then he lay down there. He dreamed and saw a raised staircase, its foundation on earth and its top touching the sky. And Jacob's and God's messengers were ascending and descending on it. Suddenly the Lord was standing on it and saying, "I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will become like the dust of the earth. You will spread out to the west, east, north, and south. Every family of earth will be blessed because of you and your descendants. I am with you now. I will protect you everywhere you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done everything that I have promised you." When Jacob woke from his sleep, he thought to himself, "The Lord is definitely in this place, but I didn't know it." He was terrified and thought, "This sacred place is awesome. It's none other than God's house and the entrance to heaven." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Now, I already gave away the opening question of my sermon, but just how tired do you have to be to fall asleep with your head on a stone pillow? To me, that sounds like utter exhaustion. I can't even imagine. But Jacob is tired. He's tired of running. And I imagine that the first several nights he didn't sleep at all, because he was certain that Esau was on his heel and would soon kill him. And he must have been incredibly worried. I don't know how you can sleep when you're that frightened or that scared. But if you've gone several nights staying awake because you're afraid, finally, you're going to be so tired that you can fall asleep with your head on a pillow of stone. That's how tired Jacob is at that moment. He's tired of running, tired of being on the run from Esau. And I suspect that when he thinks back over his whole life up until now, he's probably also tired of scheming. Jacob, as a second son, didn't naturally have all the inheritance and birthright that the oldest would have. And so he was always scheming, trying to cheat Esau out of his birthright, he and his mother teaming up to cheat Esau out of his father's blessing. And I kind of get the sense from reading this that if Jacob and Rebekah had had the opportunity to hire someone to take Jacob's SATs for him, they would have done it. It seems like that they're that kind of schemers. But after a while, it must be tiring. Always thinking about how you can be ahead, always thinking about how you can keep one step above everybody else. At some point, it's got to be tiring. And if you're into major scheming, you always have to keep one step ahead of the law as well. And that must be exhausting. But even if we're not schemers, even if we do play by all the rules, it might be that we're still striving, that we still have this sense that we have to work very hard, that we have to stay ahead. I think of juniors and seniors at Pali and Gunn who might be putting in more hours than doctors and lawyers when it comes to studying for their homework or extracurricularing, and if that's not a verb, it should be, because it describes just how busy so many of our youth are. I remember when I was in college in my last semester, I was writing a thesis, which was voluntary, and I was also doing a history seminar, which was required. And so in my last spring quarter of college, I had to finish up a 100-page thesis and a 40-page paper. And because that experience wasn't intense enough, I then immediately went to law school and went through the first year of law school. And the person on my right eventually made law review. The person on my left eventually made law review. So every day in class, I was sandwiched in between their intense drive and ambition and work ethic. It was tiring. I was getting to the point where I was tired of striving. And maybe that's where you are. Maybe you have been striving for a long time, whether it's in your career, whether it's with dynamics through your family and trying to sort through that. Maybe it's with something with your health, all those doctor's visits over and over again, all that negotiating with the insurance companies over the phone. It's tiring. It's tiring, and one of these days you're going to fall asleep with your head on a pillow of stone, because it is that utterly exhausting. But when Jacob is finally so exhausted that he does fall asleep, he has this fantastic vision. And we often know the story as Jacob's ladder, but it could be a ladder, it could be a staircase. But in Jacob's dream or vision, the angels are ascending and then descending again. And I think that's significant, because with the angels ascending, it implies that they were already there. That even with all of his scheming, with all of his striving, with his sheer exhaustion, God was with him, even though he didn't know it. And for Jacob, he doesn't even have to climb the ladder. All he has to do is rest. All he has to do is rest and be the beneficiary of this grace, of this unexpected grace. I've always been a huge fan of the spiritual Jacob's Ladder, that we are climbing Jacob's Ladder. Ken Burns used it in his documentary on the Civil War. And it's been one of my favorite spirituals. But it seems like there's a detail that's very different from what we find in the text. We are climbing Jacob's ladder, even though in the original vision, it's just the angels that were ascending and descending. And Howard Thurman was a well-known African-American theologian, and he once wrote about that. Why is it that in the spiritual we are climbing, when in the biblical text we're just resting? And Thurman realized that for people like Jacob, who are always scheming, always trying to get ahead, what they needed to hear was that it was time to rest. You don't have to strive anymore. You don't have to climb. But for the slave, and the farmer slaves who later became sharecroppers in the Jim Crow South, they were always being kept down, being told that you can't achieve anything on your own, you're a slave, you can't do it. And so for them, the most important grace was at long last being able to get up and to climb that ladder themselves. That's why, perhaps, Howard Thurman reasons that in the spiritual, we're climbing Jacob's ladder. And that's the truth that they needed to hear at that time. And even with climbing Jacob's ladder, the ladder itself is still a gift of grace. God's grace comes first. And for those who have been kept down all their lives, at long last, they have a chance to get up and climb that ladder. When I was in seminary, I did an internship year in Vallejo, California, and this was in 1996 to 97. It was my first foray into the Bay Area. I loved it, and it's amazing that all these years later I get to live here again. But during my internship year, one of the real joys was getting to know a woman named Viola Longmire, who had grown up in Alabama during the years of Jim Crow. And she had some heartbreaking and harrowing stories. And she was a woman of deep, deep faith. And one day I went to visit her because she had just gotten a broken leg from climbing up a ladder. It was a ladder that went into the attic in her garage. And she was saying, apparently she was not allowed to climb a ladder alone, which was also Pastor Margaret Bowles' rule, that you could not climb a ladder alone. But she wanted to get something that was in the attic. And her husband wasn't home, and she knew that her husband's preference was for her to wait for him so he could be there to steady the ladder before she went up. But she really wanted what she wanted to get, and so she went up the ladder. But before she started climbing up the ladder, she said that she could hear the voice of the Lord telling her, "Now, I won't be with you if you go up that ladder. You know better than to go up that ladder by yourself. If you go up that ladder, I won't be with you." So she started climbing the ladder, and sure enough, she fell, broke her leg. But thankfully, her husband was arriving about the same time. And then she was telling me that story. And I was a young seminarian, and I was thinking of Psalm 139, that beautiful psalm that assures us, where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, you are there. And yea, though I walk up a ladder unassisted and against your direct advice, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand hold me fast. And so part of the seminarian in me wanted to tell her, but don't you know that God was always going to be with you? Like, why would God be saying that I won't be with you if you go up that ladder? And I'm so thankful I held my tongue. I mean, she was a woman of deep faith. She knew Psalm 139 as well as I did. And she didn't literally mean that if, she climbed up the ladder against the voice of God telling her not to, that God wasn't just going to say, bye-bye. She knew that God was with her no matter what. But she also knew that God may or may not prosper the particular choice that she made. And if she wanted to go up the ladder unassisted to save time, well, that backfired in a huge way, because she fell down and broke her leg instead. But Viola's faith was so deep that it exuded this sense that truly, wherever we go, God is with us. God is making a way out of no way, even when we can't imagine what that might be. And so if we've been striving, maybe even scheming, the message for us is that it's just time to rest. rest and know that God is in this place, even as the angels ascend and descend the ladder unseen. And if you've been held back by family or others who didn't think that you were capable or who put you down in some way, then the message for you is that by grace you can get up and you can climb that ladder. And God will make the way out of no way. And so whether you need to keep sleeping on that stone pillow or start climbing up the ladder, the good news is that God is with you. All glory and praise be to our God. Amen.